everybody. Lovely to see you again. This is the next episode in my series where I have a conversation with someone else, another practitioner who works in the energetic world. And I haven't actually spoken to anybody yet who works in and around the world of tarot, but Chris Butler does. And I met Chris recently at the T.A.B.I conference up in Manchester. We met each other and we got on like a house on fire, and we
We did
share.
actually, didn't we?
We did, didn't we? We
Yeah.
did, and we share a lot of the same feelings and views around tarot. So, and Chris has got some fascinating new projects coming up. So I thought guys would be interested to meet him and hear about what he's doing. So, Chris, just talk to us a little bit about how you got into tarot. What was the beginning of your tarot journey? What led you to this path?
Oh, God, long story. Thanks for having me before I start.
That's
This
all
is
right.
great fun. Uh, oh, my tarot journey started in the funniest way when I was 13. I mean, I'm 56 now, but my tarot journey started by watching a James Bond film. I'd always had a fascination with playing cards as a young child. My grandmother was an avid card player, and I can always remember from a very early age, there were always playing cards left around in the living room, and it was the court cards, just the intricacy and the colours and the patterns always used to fascinate me. But I can remember as well becoming fascinated as a kid by the concept of divination with playing cards. And then it would have been what? Easter 1981, along came the James Bond film Live and Let Die on the telly. And there was Jane Seymour with this utterly amazing deck of cards that weren't just red, yellow, and blue like playing cards. They were full technical or oil paintings. And, they had these incredible, mysterious figures on them. And luckily for me, I had really sympathetic parents. And, I can remember saying to my dad, what's that? And he said, oh, that's the tarot. And bless them, because they could see that I was really fascinated. They took me into Manchester the following week. We went through the phone directory, found a shop that sold tarot, and we went and got my first deck, which was a Swiss 1JJ. And you could kind of tell I was going to become a compulsive collector even at that stage, because once I realized it wasn't the deck that was in the film, I then tried again when my pocket money had been saved up a couple of weeks later, got myself a Waite Smith, and then finally got the Fergus Hall deck that was in the film. So there was me, sort of age 13 going on 14, with these three incredible decks. And that was my introduction to tarot. And the imagery, even at that early age, I found it very easy to sort of lose myself in the imagery, particularly with the Waite Smith deck. It kind of almost felt like this exotic imaginary garden that I could step into. And I suppose even back then, one of the ways that I use tarot now is very much as a portal to visualization, and sort of guided meditations. And I suppose it's interesting, you can even, if you look back, you can kind of see the beginnings of me learning to do that as a teenager. So that's how I discovered tarot. The rest of the story is very complex. I walked away from tarot in my late teens. I came back to it with a vengeance in my 30s, and then started creating my own first deck in 2002. That didn't get published, but I've gone on to have 3 tarot decks and a number of oracle decks published that I've illustrated. So it's not just a deep passion, it's also been like the cornerstone of my career as an illustrator as well.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And so you were telling us at the tarot conference about your dichotomy with formalized religion and the tarot, and that's quite interesting. And I think there aren't many of us who have worked in tarot who haven't hit up against some sort of protestation, shall we say,
Yeah.
to put it gently, from especially the sort of mainstream Christian community. So talk to us a little bit about that. how have you made your peace with that? Because you were quite serious along that road of mainstream
Oh yeah,
Christianity for quite some time.
serious, but for the wrong reasons. I grew up in the 70s and 80s. So I was a child of, I mean, I was born in 67, so I was a child of the 70s. I was literally the definitive 80s teenager. I turned 13 in 1980. Of course, hit puberty and then began to emerge as a gay teenager. The difficulty there was not home. Home was free thinking and secular, but my parents had sent me to a private school that was run by a very radicalized Plymouth Brethren preacher. It was very much run along religious lines. Mum and Dad didn't send me there for the religion. They sent me there because it had a really great academic track record. So I came out with a raft of O levels, but completely messed up psychologically. Basically, my emerging sexuality came head on against a brick wall of a religious fundamentalism. I'd gone to the same school from age 5 right through to 16, so that teaching and worldview was all I knew. And as I got into my late teens, basically the pressure of guilt that was caused by that worldview and my emerging sexuality caused a breakdown. And it was around the time of the dreaded Billy Graham Mission England rallies, and friends took me to a Mission England rally. And of course, I was on the verge of a breakdown. And of course, I just went forward out of guilt, got involved in the evangelical church. And of course, what that resulted in was me being referred to conversion therapy, which over a period of, oh God, I mean, from my late teens through to my late 20s, which had a devastating effect. I began my coming out process at 26. It took me 12 years to break free from. Something that I did mention at the conference was that my 3 tarot decks that I owned as a teenager, when it was discovered by my church leaders that I was in possession of tarot decks, I was ordered to bring them to them, and then they were torn up in front of me, which I recognize now as a horrendously abusive act. One of my acts of defiance when I began to sort of break free from the church in my 30s was that this was at the dawn of eBay. So I went on eBay and I was determined to replace those decks like for like, edition for edition. So even though I can never have those original copies back, I have identical copies, and they are actually among my most treasured possessions. The irony is that, breaking free from the church and breaking free from the conversion therapy world, coming to accept myself as a gay man, basically one of the most fundamental tools in that healing process was the tarot. Following a second breakdown in my 30s, I was referred into therapy, but obviously, therapy on the NHS, you get 10 sessions. And I was very much aware that, work that was started in those therapy sessions would have to be carried on. And I didn't realize I was doing it at the time. I mean, I'd created my first tarot deck for myself, thought that's it, fulfilled an ambition. Of course, went on to create a second one, which was specifically themed for gay men. And of course, what I understand now is that by putting myself, to create those cards, asking the question, what would this card look like if there was a gay man at the heart of it? Basically, through the creative process, I was saying, what would this card look like if I was in the heart of it? And what went on to be published by Schiffer Books as the Sun Tarot, which I can show you here, this is still available. It's a deck and book set. There's quite a large book in here. But what went on to be published as this basically was my healing process. It took 10 months to create the deck. And I realize now that in meditating on the cards, I was actually resolving a lot of my internalized issues. And that was that creative process that taught me not just the power of the tarot, but the healing potential of the tarot. And that very much forms a cornerstone of my work now. My next published deck, one of my next published decks the Healing Light Tarot. That is a more traditional tarot deck, but again, it focuses on the healing aspect of the cards, you know, how we can find transformation through working with those tarot archetypes. And that's a really important part of my work. But then it's important because it's personal. I've lived through it. I've experienced, you know, the positivity of what the tarot can do in that respect. So the tarot isn't just something I'm fascinated with. It was a lifesaver, literally.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I just got to look at it humorously. You know, the church never managed to straighten me out. Thank God, you know. And yeah, it's, I still retain, I'm not a complete atheist. I still retain a spiritual belief, a belief in a higher power, but I don't subscribe to any organized religion anymore, or a specific set of beliefs. And I'm kind of thankful for that as well. I mean, I can understand people walking away from religious abuse, you know, not having any faith. But at the same time, I'm really thankful that, you know, that didn't happen to me, because actually my spirituality and my faith are something that are very important to me. I certainly don't subscribe to buildings, organizations, or specific religious texts anymore. So, but then everybody finds their own path, you know?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. It's interesting, isn't it, how the Plymouth Brethren link was instrumental in Aleister Crowley's journey.
Really? I didn't know that. Tell me.
Yeah, he was brought up part of the Plymouth Brethren.
Why am I not surprised?
I know, and it was the backlash against that
Yeah.
that basically caused him to should we say, reject rules. And I mean, obviously he was also, you know, highly intelligent guy, and wanted to live his life in a way that was not bound by this very prescriptive, brutal, joyless, really.
Joyless, totally joyless. It's, sorry for interrupting, but it's interesting that you mentioned that, because I spent from age 5 through to 16 in the one school, because it was infants, primary and secondary. But I spent years hearing discussions about Christian morals and Christian principles. They were two words that came up very often. You never heard any mention of joy or love, you know, and it was a joyless, you walked into that place and it would just sap the joy out of life, you know. So I did not know that Crowley came from a Plymouth Brethren background. It makes so much sense now, you know.
Yeah.
And also there's a kind of playful irreverence about the Thoth tarot that it took me years to cotton onto. You know, the Ace of Discs has 666 you know, in its center, and then, you know, sort of, I think somewhere around the disc is the inscription Meta Tu Theron, isn't it, which translates you know, I think, is it something like devoted, you know, devoted to the beast. And of course at the time I found that quite shocking, until I realized that that was Crowley's in-joke and his nickname was the Beast. But that kind of, there is a kind of two fingers up attitude about the Thoth tarot.
There is. I mean, the one that makes me laugh is strength, is it strength,
which
has been, which is lust, yes. And that's quite I mean, that's a very powerful, you know, up yours, isn't it, to the
very much so. Yeah.
to the puritanical brethren. I mean, it is interesting, and I mean, not wanting to go down the rabbit hole of Crowley, but obviously he went from one extreme to the other, rather, and which I think is common. You obviously didn't do that, but I think, you know, I've known a couple of people who grew up with the Plymouth Brethren, and they really struggle with finding a balance.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's very, it's a joyless environment, but it's also it's repressive in the extreme. And I found my experience was, I mean, as a young gay man, I learned to jump ship from churches very quickly when I sensed danger, because I mean, it's interesting. I mean, I was embroiled in the conversion therapy movement, but there was an added thing that once churches found out that you were gay, very often attitudes would change completely and the behavior would become abusive. So I jumped from church to church and denomination to denomination. It says a lot about my levels of guilt that I actually just kept jumping from church to church rather than walking away. You know,
Yeah.
It took me a long time to kind of unpick that guilt and actually just look at the church as a collective and say, this is just outright abusive. Not all churches are abusive. I mean, particularly now, I mean, I think the fact that times have moved on and so many faith communities and churches are, you know, embracing of diversity, but certainly back then, you know, it really wasn't the case. It was, you know, welcoming churches were in the minority. And also you kind of become conditioned to think, well, you know, they're not following the true path. That's how, you know, internalized the self-hatred was. But it's, I mean, I managed to break free and deal with that guilt. But I think, I mean, going back to the sort of Crowley issue and the Plymouth Brethren and those sort of really extreme, hyper radicalized sectors of the church, I would say, people become so institutionalized that they actually don't function outside of that reality, and they either break free and go completely wild, which I certainly did in my 30s. The pendulum swung in the other direction and then gradually leveled out. And I kind of look at Crowley, bless him, and I think, well, the pendulum never really swung back, you know. But yeah, it's one of the things I think, I mean, I look back now, and one of the reasons I think radical religious denominations fear things like the tarot, and it is fear. I don't care what anyone says, you know, they will kind of turn it into a moral protest or say it's a moral protest, but it is actually deep-rooted fear. But I think they fear anything that actually empowers people and helps them to come into their real selves, because actually ultimately most of the people that I met in those churches, they were kind of frightened of their own potential, and they were frightened of their own inner selves. They were frightened of the reality of their own inner selves. I mean, so many people within those really radicalized churches were just suppressed psychologically, sexually, and just really had no idea of a fraction of their own potential. But then I think deep down, divination is a tool and it's a guide, and it actually helps us to step into our own. And actually, if you're in an environment where self-determination is viewed as the ultimate sin, then something like tarot becomes a real threat. You know, and a very dangerous threat at that. I mean, I can remember being in one church and we were given this list of things to avoid. And it was interesting because it was like yoga, crystals, tarot, Tai Chi, you know, and it was all new age evil, you know. And
wow,
for, you know, for an environment and a religion that supposedly is based on victory and freedom, I don't think I ever experienced a more scared and tied up group of people.
That is so, I can't believe that yoga would be on the list.
Oh yeah, yeah. Because it basically, the thinking was, it comes from an idolatrous spiritual belief or an idolatrous spiritual faith. Therefore, you know, you are opening yourself to, you know, you're opening yourself to the demonic world by, you know, by getting involved in these things. And it was constantly this list of don'ts, but there were never any do's, you know, apart from toe the line. And deep down, fundamentalist religion, I mean, from bitter experience, I know that fundamentalist religion is all about control. You know,
Yes.
ultimately it's about control. And very often the people that were in leadership, that control would spread over into abuse.
Yes.
You know, I found it was a very toxic world. For me, tarot was one of the most powerful healing tools that I had at my disposal. And I'm so grateful. I mean, I look back now and I think back to just switching the TV over, knowing that there was a James Bond film on. That was a life-changing moment, you know. I mean, I don't think Jane Seymour would have ever seen it like that, you know, and, you know, I'd be lying if I said I didn't cover the reading table and the frog. I mean, that film was fabulous, wasn't it? You know?
Oh, it was awesome.
I mean, who doesn't
Awesome.
want a reading table with a built-in cape and then a hat that comes down on a, you know, but
That would be fairly dramatic.
for a kid like me with a real, you know, I'm hardwired visual and I'm also synesthetic.
Yeah.
So, you know, sounds and music evoke colors in my brain. Words evoke colors, you know. So something as richly visual as the tarot, you know, immediately captured my attention, and thank God it did. You know,
Yes.
it's, you know, because it actually became, you know, it was one of the main things that actually, you know, it really did save my life. So, but that was why I was interested talking to you, because like you said, we see the tarot in the same way, you know, and, you know, certainly as a tool for understanding and as a mirror that reflects back, you know, and things that, you know, I would, you know, sometimes you can't see the wood for the trees, where, you know, whereas all of a sudden, you know, you see yourself in a tarot archetype and then it kind of just clicks into place. And to me, that's what a good reading is about. You know, you come out with choices, you come out feeling empowered, and you come out feeling that you understand it, you know, you understand your circumstances a little bit better than when you went in.
Yes, yes. And I have a you know, people say to me sometimes in readings, how do we know if it's true? How do we know? And I say, because you do know, because you feel it, because you feel it's true.
Yeah.
And you always know the truth when you hear it. It may not be exactly what you would have wanted, or perhaps it was, but you know, you know, I don't, you probably, as do I, have clients come who have had readings on phone lines and things, and have been given the too good to be true outcome. You know, this person is your soulmate or whatever, and whatever that might be. And it's interesting that they choose to try and find another source of information, because even though it was what they wanted to hear, they couldn't quite believe it because it didn't ring true.
Something, you've hit the nail on the head, because I think even if people don't quantify what's happening, subconsciously they kind of know it doesn't fit. And I think if you have to go and look for supplemental answers, that's your answer in itself. You know, the very first tarot workshop I ran, I did as a collaborative effort, and it was with a dear university friend who I'd not seen for years. We reconnected up, I think about 2014, and we'd never discussed tarot when we were at university. We didn't know that we both had this long-standing interest, and we ended up deciding to run a tarot workshop together, which we called the Sacred Tarot. And she is a Jungian therapist, so we ran it from the perspective of a therapeutic perspective, and also from an imagery and symbol perspective. And I learned so much from her just doing that workshop. But there was one piece of wisdom that she gave me that has always stuck with me, and it was her take on the tarot. And she said to me, look, the tarot is never going to tell you anything that you don't already know. And at the time when she said that, it's not the case. But then the more I thought about it, I thought that is totally the case, because the tarot triggers truth inside you. You know, the tarot doesn't, it will not give you an accurate picture of the future. It will not tell you that a tall, dark stranger is going to come and sweep you off your feet. But what it will do is it'll trigger your own intuitions, and it'll make those connections with your internal truths and help to bring them up to the surface. And yeah, you're right. I mean, I think when people do go and get these readings, and if a reader tells you what you want to hear, the reader hasn't done their job. You know, but if a reader actually clears the way out for you to discover your own truth in the cards, then they've done their job. You know, a good reader steps back and actually facilitates that connection process, you know.
Yes, yes. And I would really love to see tarot, and this is my next big deal, I think. I would love to see tarot stepping forward as a spiritual path in its own right, and to be seen as that, because there's no judgment, there's no sin. It doesn't require you to do or obey anything. It's just giving you a way of making life better, should you choose to engage with it. But it doesn't need you to do it. It's not going to tell you anything bad's going to happen if you don't, although life may well be trickier and perhaps harder to navigate, but that is entirely your choice. And that's the point. It comes from a position of complete free will. And
it's interesting, isn't it? Because to me, it's a non-judgmental book of wisdom in the way that the religious texts that I followed previously really weren't. And even if the texts were, unfortunately, the followers that co-opted them very often were judgmental. And it's interesting because the tarot has some difficult cards. The fact that the tarot specifically has a judgment card, you know, along with, you know, some really quite uncomfortable cards like Death, the Devil, the Ten of Swords, the Nine of Swords. The difference is the tarot just presents them and says, you know, this is just part of life. You know, the judgment card in itself is, for me, is just an archetype of waking up and taking responsibility. You know, it's actually when the truth slaps you in the face and you can't avoid it anymore. You know, the Death card, the Ten of Swords, the Nine of Swords, you know, the myth of death meaning physical death, of course it doesn't. It means irrevocable change. You know, the Ten of Swords, the Nine of Swords just tell me that, you know, cruelty and suffering happen. You know, and we can't change that, but it's what we do with them and how we face it in our own lives. I don't like watered down tarot decks. I don't like sort of, you know, I don't like it when people try to replace those cards, because you're actually watering down something that's really important to be faced. And actually, within my own experience, they were some of the most healing cards when I was coming through my own journey. You know, they helped me to acknowledge, I mean, certainly the Nine of Swords card, you know, the card of cruelty, which I think is the most uncompromising card in the deck. That was the card that helped me to face the reality of the abuse that I'd suffered. You know, because all of a sudden I realized, there were people sticking those swords in me. If that card, you know, if I'd have been working with decks that had watered that card down, I wouldn't have made that realization quite so quickly. You know. So painful cards, difficult or dangerous cards, no. You know, life-affirming cards, because they do tell you the reality, but again, in a non-judgmental way. I mean, that's what I love about the tarot. It's like this is how it is. You know.
I know, and there is advice and guidance in every one of those difficult cards, so it doesn't just leave you with the tough bit and go, well, this is life, suck it up. It says, okay, this is the tough bit, but here's how you can look at it, and here's how you can move past it. And I think that's the lovely part. And I think for me, and I'm my kids have very much always warned me against being too specific about this, but I do see the tarot as a Bible. I see it as a Bible that's every bit as important as the Christian Bible, the Quran, the Torah, all of them. It is and it's interactive. So, I mean, it will reply.
Yeah.
If you ask it a question, it will give you an answer. And I think that's fantastically useful.
It's interesting, isn't
Fantastic.
it? It's like an unbound book. I think of it as a book with
Yes,
interchangeable
me too.
pages that aren't sewn together.
Mm.
And it's funny you saying about the fact that it does give answers, because I mean, going back to the Nine of Swords card, for me, that was the one that really helped me to face the reality of the abuses that I'd faced in conversion therapy. But the fact that the tarot does give answers, because also what the other card that sort of immediately connected to that and helped me on that journey was the Eight of Cups, because the Eight of Cups taught me that I could walk away.
Yes.
And I could see that stack of cups as all of those years that I'd spent within the church. And actually, I had to, I could then look at those cups and say, one, this has come to an end. Two, it was a futile journey. But three, I am perfectly at liberty to walk away. And
Yes.
there is health and there's healing in that walking away, and recognizing that this has come to an end. And also very empowering, that I could say, this is a closed book and it's my time to walk away.
Yes.
The Seven of Cups taught me that I had choices. Each one of those cups has something different in it. And it wasn't just a case of walking away and licking my wounds. I could walk away, and there were very exciting choices. Ten of Swords showed me that the pain had come to an end, or it wasn't indefinite. Nothing lasts forever. And even though the Ten of Swords, again, it's like a sort of secondary death card, but actually there's a powerful lesson in that. Sadly, all good things come to an end, which is no bad thing, but all bad things come to an end as well.
Yes.
So yeah, it's a book full of powerful advice and paths and life choices, and just a book of positivity. I mean, that to me, I mean, I'm an illustrator. I'm a visual boy. So for my sacred text to be in pictures, brilliant. That's how I was taught, So hence the name of my YouTube channel, and my whole ethos around tarot is Sacred Tarot, because like you said, it is sacred. For me is anything that it recognizes our the transcendent aspect of who we are. We're not just physical, we're spiritual, we're emotional, there is an aspect of us that goes beyond the physical that we don't fully understand. And anything that reveres that and enhances it, to me, is sacred. And that's what the tarot is,
Yes.
So.
Yes. Fantastic. So you're working on, or you're just about to announce, a whole new project. Talking of being a visual boy and
being a visual boy, I've had to keep this under wraps since last year, and I've just had the best time. Because I mean, I've got two things forthcoming. Next year, before the pandemic, I was working with a lovely guy called Ken Payne on an oracle deck centered around the goddess Hecate. It's due out next year from Lo Scarabeo. It's called the Oracle of the Hecatean Path. So that was delayed several years, obviously, as a lot of projects were. So it's lovely to see that. But last year, I got approached by Kim Arnold, who runs the UK Tarot Conference, and we ended up talking about creating a major arcana deck to celebrate 20 years of the conference. It's the 20th anniversary this year. So I've been working on that and keeping it under wraps, and I got my test copy, and we announced it last week. So this is Arcana 20, and it's just a really joyful celebration of all of actually not just of the conference, but of the speakers that have kind of come to the conference and given their teaching. So every card in this is a speaker from the last 10 years of the conference. Kim did a deck on the 10th anniversary. So we've concentrated, with the odd exception, on speakers from the last 10 years. So You can see I'm there on the full card looking very irreverent because I presented
Lovely.
2 years on the run. We've tried to match speakers with cards that we felt really expressed their take on the tarot. Neil Kelso is on the magician, but then Neil is a stage magician and an actor,
magician.
in real life. And all of that, the ethos of his job feeds into his incredible take on the tarot. An amazing Wiccan high priestess from Switzerland called Wicca Maya Spring is on the high priestess card. And it goes on. And I've just had the loveliest time creating this.
Beautiful.
So David DeAngelis, who created the Starman Tarot, the Bowie inspired tarot, is on the Emperor card. So this has been this. I don't think I've ever had so much fun creating a project as this. Hopefully, at some stage, this will get expanded out into a full 78er. But in the meantime, it's available for pre-order from the UK Tarot Conference website, which is tarotconference.co.uk, and we will kind of give it its physical launch at the conference in a couple of weeks. So it's just lovely to have been working on this. It's also very precious to me because I lost my father earlier on in the year. This was the last project that Dad knew I was working on, and when I told him I was working on this, one, he was really proud of me, but two, he was just fascinated. He saw 3 cards completed before he took ill. So this, you know, I've kind of dedicated this in my own heart to Dad. So you know, it's kind of wonderful to see it come to fruition, knowing that, you know, he saw it started anyway. So
wow, they look very powerful, very, very, very powerful cards. I mean, what a wonderful thing to, you know, to be depicted in the role of one of the major arcanas. That's amazing.
I mean, I have got a funny story to tell because I you know, some people watching this will know of Marion Kirk. She is a Scottish-based tarot reader, astrologer, and she's also a regular columnist for the Esoterical magazine, which is Kim Arnold and Stephen Bright's amazing magazine. It's you know, I think it's one of the first fully tarot devoted magazines. And of course, Marion is a columnist for that, and she's also written companion books to go with a number of tarot decks. So we asked the certain cards that you kind of don't want to offer, you know, you don't want to say to people, you know, would you be this? And the death card was one of them, and it was quite funny because, I mean, Kim approached Christopher Hughes to approach on the deck, and he actually said, can I be Mr. Death? Which was a relief because we didn't want to offer it to anyone else. But of course, that's a powerful statement in itself, because, I mean, apart from Chris being the head of the Order of Ovates and Bards in Wales, he also worked for years as a coroner. So that card has deep resonances for him. So we were thrilled, you know, that he wanted to be on that card. Because it left us with the Hanged Man. I mean, you know, you think, I don't want to offer this to anyone. And we ended up, Kim sort of very bravely offered it to Marion, and she sort of, you know, she's a great sport. She said yes. But I kind of thought, oh, you know, what do I do with this? And I thought, here I am, you know, I'm offering to hang this woman upside down and put her in mandrag, you know, so I don't know how she's going to respond. And she's a great sport. And of course, I sent her the artwork when I finished it. And I thought, I'm just switching the computer off because, I mean, I'm dreading what the response is going to be. And I got this really tongue-in-cheek message back the following morning. She said, oh, Hen, she said, that's the best I've looked in years.
That's fabulous.
Bless Marion.
Oh, yes.
But then there was another reason we put Marion on here, because I love chatting to Marion on video calls, because she will always, she's got such, I think because she's an adept astrologer, she brings this amazing insight into her tarot readings. And one of the reasons I love the thought of having Marion on here is she always manages to turn my perspectives on their head. She will always bring this alternate viewpoint, you know. And it's great if, you know, we'll very often we'll kind of chat and share our readings together in video calls, and, you know, and she always manages to give me that altered perspective. So that's what I kind of hope that these cards do. With it's a celebration of a lot of the amazing talent that's within our community and the amazing wisdom that's in our community. But I kind of wanted the cards to be a celebration of that as much as, you know, a traditional major arcana tarot deck that anyone could pick up and read with. And the lovely thing about doing this for me is, again, I mean, when I started out with tarot in my teens, you know, I was only reading with the majors. You know, there was so little literature out there. And, you know, I would just separate the majors out and I'd read with them. And actually this deck has kind of taught me the joy of doing that again, because you get a very different sort of reading, you know.
Yes, absolutely.
So I you know, Kim and I hope that this is the kind of deck that you could just pick up and read with, but then it has that extra dimension of celebrating the amount of accumulated wisdom that there is within the tarot world. If you go to any conference, like what, you know, we met at the T.A.B.I conference, the UK Tarot Conference, you start to realize that there's this vast pool of untapped wisdom within the tarot world, and, you know, years and years of experience, built up wisdom. And even when you know, even if it's not just, you know, if it's not well-known names, even if you're in a room with people that have worked with tarot for years, that wisdom starts to come out, and that's what we wanted to celebrate, you know.
Yes.
All those different perspectives. I mean, we've scratched the surface. I mean, we've celebrated, what, 22 different people? You know, there's so much more, you know. Any number of people could have gone on those cards. So
yeah, but it's wonderful. It's a lovely celebration, and they look like they've been canonized in their major arcana personas.
They actually, I hadn't thought of it like that, but they have, because I mean, let me take the Temperance card. I mean, again, this is one of my favorites, but, you know, talking of T.A.B.I and the T.A.B.I Tarot Conference, of course, Janine Worthington, who's the chairman of T.A.B.I, we put her on the Temperance card. But, you know, I kind of thought, Janine deserves to be canonized. And we specifically put her up here because Janine's deck, the In-Between Tarot, is just one of the most unique perspectives on the tarot that I've ever seen, because Janine focuses, I mean, I love that deck. You know, rather than a literal deck, Janine kind of shifts all of the tarot figures into the liminal space between each card, doesn't she? So, like with the High Priestess, you know, to the left of the card, you've got the space occupied by the Magician. To the right, the space occupied by the Empress. And it's as if you're kind of journeying through worlds.
Yes,
and, I mean, there was just no, I mean, she had to go on Temperance. I mean, that whole blending thing is personified. You know, so Saint Janine, definitely.
Absolutely.
You know,
absolutely. That's fantastic. Well, I mean, Chris, it all sounds really, really exciting. And so do you want to just tell people how they can reach you if they want to, just you know?
I'd love to hear from you. The best way that you can find, well, there's several ways that you can find me online. I'm on Instagram at Chris Butler Tarot. Primarily, I'm on YouTube at Sacred Tarot. That Sacred Tarot is the name of my channel. I love to create decks, but I also love to teach tarot. So Sacred Tarot is primarily a learning hub. There's an in-depth learn tarot course on there, but I also love to bring other tarot creators, tarot teachers, tarot authors onto my channel. So there's a lot of conversation with other authors, deck creators on there. So you can always reach me through there. I'm also on Facebook at Sacred Tarot. So they're my three sacred media outlets. If you want to see my artwork, I've got my own website, which is christopherbutler.cravado.com. But again, if you go onto my YouTube channel, all the links for that sort of stuff are there. And do get in touch. It's always lovely to hear from people. My website, you know, my art website primarily showcases samples of my art from my published work. So again, if you're interested in my decks, I've got 3 tarot decks published, 2 Lenormand decks, and then obviously there is Arcana 20, which is now on there. and also artwork from the forthcoming Oracle of the Hecatean Path. So yeah, do get in touch online. It's always lovely to hear from people, and you know, certainly where my YouTube channel is concerned, if you enjoy what's there, do like and subscribe and follow the courses.
Yeah, perfect. Well, thank you, Chris. It's been lovely to chat to you.
Thanks
again.
for having me. It's been a joy.
Excellent. All right then. Well, bye-bye for now.
Take care. Bye.